Nowadays, empathy is a word that we hear quite often on social media, in the workplace, and pretty much everywhere. But one of the biggest challenges we see is that empathy is being confused with expectations. So leaders around the world are doing their best to display empathy, but unfortunately at the same time, expectations and standards are going out the window. Not to mention a number of leaders that have said, but I don't agree. So in today's video, I'm going to break down the 3 different ways that you can show empathy and how to show empathy without necessarily agreeing with the individual and without losing expectations within the workplace. My name is Natalina Nasruddin. I'm the CEO and founder of Rise Up For You, and welcome to Rise Up For You TV, where we provide strategies, insights, and awesome stories just to help you and your team be your absolute best. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about empathy. My team and I, we work with leaders around the world every single day, and this is one of the biggest topics that we have to address, is how do we show empathy while at the same time making sure that we can set boundaries, set expectations, and also agree to disagree. Well, let's first talk about the 3 types of empathy we have. Empathy number 1 is what we call cognitive empathy. This is the most basic level of empathy. This means that I understand what you're going through. There's something in me that can relate and connect to what you're saying or your situation. This is what we call cognitive empathy. Empathy number 2 is what we call emotional empathy. This means that I'm so empathetic to what you're saying and what I'm hearing that I actually feel it in my body. I always like to connect this to maybe watching a movie or listening to a song. Maybe you watch something on TV or you hear something and you're so moved by the situation that you start to cry. Maybe you feel it in your throat. Maybe you get so upset at a situation that you feel it in your stomach. This is a display of emotional empathy. And empathy number 3 is what we call empathic concern. This is the deepest level of empathy. This means that you feel so empathetic and moved by the situation or the person or persons that are sitting in front of you that you must take an action and you cannot rest until you do. So an example of this is predominantly nonprofit founders. A lot of founders of nonprofit organizations, they built the nonprofit or they created the nonprofit because they were so moved by a cause, by a mission, by something that's potentially happening globally that they had to do something about it. They wanted to raise funds. They wanted to create programming for youth. They wanted to help the homeless. And so they built nonprofit organizations, meaning they were so moved, they had empathic concern that they had to do something and they had to take an action. Now, I want you to ask yourself, out of the 3 different empathies that I've displayed and that I've taught you today, which one do you use most often? Now, of course, you're going to use all 3 of them depending on the situation. You might say, well, Netta, I use empathic concern when I'm talking to my kids, right? But you might say, but when it comes to the workplace, I'm 100% cognitive empathy where I can understand, but that's pretty much it. And that's okay. The first step is to recognize which type of empathy you display most often. Now, let's talk about being a leader and having empathy. The biggest challenge, again, that we see today is leaders that are confusing. The biggest challenge that we see today, again, is leaders that are confusing empathy with expectation. It is possible for you to show empathy and at the same time express the need and the standard that is set within the organization. And it is possible for you to show empathy and still disagree, and that is okay. The biggest piece to showing empathy while setting expectations is providing clarity in direction and also sharing with the team member the impact that their situation could potentially have. So let's give you an example of what it could look like in the workplace. A team member comes up to you and says, I have 2 kids, I love my job, but I need to work remotely because this is gonna help me get my kids to school on time and pick them up. I don't feel like I need to come to the office. You've probably heard this quite a few times. It's not going anywhere anytime soon, right? So how do we set expectations and still be empathetic towards the situation? Now, you might say, well, no, we have a return to office policy. Every single employee has to come into the office. Okay, so how do we mitigate and have this conversation? It might sound something like this. Samantha, I completely understand you have 2 kids. I understand that it can be challenging having a full-time job, coming into the office, having to pick them up from school, having to take them back from school. I completely understand where you're coming from. Okay, step number 1, I'm acknowledging and I'm just showing cognitive empathy that I understand. Step number 2, hear me out. Samantha, unfortunately, for this environment and for this workplace, when team members don't come into the office, it makes a huge impact on our morale. It also impacts our communication and how we work together. For this industry and for this company, it's critical that all key team members are on site for collaboration, for creativity, and for optimal communication. Unfortunately, all team members are required to come into the office. Okay, step number 2 is I'm expressing the consequences as a whole organization, not as a one person. Oftentimes as leaders, we put I in there too much, or we talk from a standpoint of me, and this isn't about you. What you need to do is express clearly to the team member how this situation could impact the overall team and the organization. Step number 3. So Samantha, moving forward, here are some of our options. I'm happy to brainstorm a little bit more with you, but unfortunately, it looks like we're gonna need to have you come back into the office, which we would love. You're a valued team member. We want you to be a part of it. How about we do this? How about you take a little bit of time to think about it, and then we can reconvene in the next 3 to 4 days and have another discussion to see how you feel. Okay, so last step is I'm providing an action step and potentially a solution and helping her recognize the options that she has. And now the team member can take it from there. At the end of the day, showing empathy does not mean that you need to buckle on your policies, your procedures, and your standards. If you can make it work and you can come up with solutions, great. But there are gonna be times where you're gonna say, this is the policy, this is what we're doing as an organization, and it's your job as a leader to show empathy while at the same time communicating the impact of the consequences. My name is Natalina Nastardine. I'm the CEO and the founder of Rise Up For You, and we get the honor of working with leaders, professionals, and corporations around the world every single day, talking about these critical skills that we often just are not taught. That's the emotional intelligence, the communication, the leadership, and how to really show up as your best beyond the technical skill. Again, my name is Netta, CEO and founder of Rise Up For You. Welcome to the Rise Up For You TV. If you haven't already, make sure you click subscribe. I'll see you next time.